You won't believe the day it happened. Even now I can hear her voice in my head, sharp, shrill, dripping with that fake southern politeness that always hides venom underneath. It was a warm afternoon in our little Texas suburb, the kind where the cicadas buzz louder than your own thoughts. My boy, Daniel, was outside in his wheelchair, sketching the neighbor's oak tree like he always did. Drawing was his peace. It kept him calm after everything he'd been through since the accident. Was inside grading papers. Yep, even though I'm a retired teacher, I still tutor kids from around the block. Teaching is in my blood. But that day, I heard the slam of car doors, then the sound of heels clacking up my driveway. When I opened the door, there she stood. HOA Karen, short blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and the HOA binder hugged to her chest like it was scripture. "Mr. Collins," she began with a fake smile so wide it could crack, "we've had several complaints about your son's presence." Her words hit me like a slap. "Presence?" I asked, my voice steady, but my heart racing. "Yes," she said, tapping her binder. "Several homeowners have noted that his wheelchair ramp isn't aesthetically consistent with our community guidelines, and as for his little outdoor activities, well, they're drawing attention." I stared at her, stunned. My son, my disabled son, wasn't hurting a soul. He was sketching trees, for crying out loud. "You're saying a ramp that lets my boy enter his own home is against the rules?" I asked. Karen's smile grew tighter. "Rules are rules. We can't show favoritism. If we let you slide, everyone will want exceptions." At that moment, something in me snapped. You know that feeling when you realize someone isn't just being difficult, they're being cruel? That was it. I knew this wasn't about property values. It was about control, about power. I leaned forward. "Listen, carefully. That ramp isn't a decoration, it's a lifeline. And if you or your HOA think you can take that from my son, you're dead wrong." Her eyes narrowed behind those ridiculous sunglasses. She tapped her binder once more, then handed me a notice. A fine for non-compliance. I watched her heels click back down my driveway, my fists shaking. Daniel had rolled up behind me, his sketch pad on his lap. "Dad," he asked softly, "did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside him, forcing a smile. "No, son, you did everything right. It's them who are wrong." Inside, though, I was boiling. This wasn't just HOA drama. This was discrimination, plain and simple. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself and to Daniel. I wasn't going to let this stand. What do you think? Should HOAs even have the power to fine families over disability accommodations? Comment yes or no. Little did Karen know, I wasn't some pushover homeowner. I was a teacher who had spent his life fighting for kids' rights. And now, I was about to fight harder than ever. You ever get that sinking feeling when you open your mailbox and you just know trouble is waiting inside? That was me a week after Karen's little driveway performance. There it was, another bright white envelope with the HOA's seal in the corner. Inside, bold letters screamed at me, "Notice of violation, non-compliance with community standards." They were fining me again. This time, not just for the wheelchair ramp. Now they claimed Daniel's activities in view of the public were a nuisance. A nuisance. My son, sitting quietly with a sketchbook, was a nuisance? I gripped the paper so hard my hands shook. It wasn't just about the money, though. That stung plenty. It was about what it meant. They were targeting us. They were singling out my boy, my disabled son, for simply existing. I won't lie to you. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair and just stared at that letter. I thought about all the years I'd spent teaching kids, helping them feel like they belonged. And now, here I was, in my own home, being told my son didn't belong. You know that tightness in your chest when anger mixes with heartbreak? That's exactly what it felt like. But then Daniel rolled in, munching on a granola bar. "Mail?" he asked. I shoved the paper into my pocket before he could see. "Just bills, bud," I said with a smile. Truth was, I didn't want him carrying that weight. He had enough to deal with already. That night, I called my neighbor, Marlene. Now, every neighborhood has one person who knows everything, and for us, that was Marlene. A retired nurse with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit. She'd lived in this subdivision longer than anyone. I told her about the fines, about Karen's binder of doom, about the word nuisance. Marlene let out a laugh so bitter it could curdle milk. "Honey, Karen's been itching to make an example out of somebody. Guess she picked the wrong family this time." "Feels personal," I admitted. "It is personal," Marlene shot back. "That woman thinks running the HOA makes her Queen of Texas. But let me tell you something. The Fair Housing Act is federal law. You don't mess with disability accommodations, not unless you want a lawsuit on your hands." Her words lit a fire in me. I'd heard of the Fair Housing Act before, sure, but I'd never thought I'd need to use it. Now, it felt like my only lifeline. The next HOA meeting came faster than I expected. Usually I skip them, boring as all get out, budget this, landscaping that. But this time, I showed up, Daniel by my side. The community center smelled of coffee and cheap carpet cleaner, folding chairs lined up in neat rows, and at the front, there she was, Karen, binder, gavel, smirk. "Meeting to order," she chirped as the agenda rolled on. My stomach tightened. Then she got to violations. "Mr. Collins," she said, glancing at me over her glasses, "your property remains out of compliance. You have been fined accordingly." I stood. "That ramp is a disability accommodation, not a violation." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Karen banged the gavel. "Rules are rules." I raised my voice, my teacher voice, the one that could silence a classroom of rowdy 10th graders in seconds. "No. Federal law says otherwise. You can't discriminate against my son. You can't fine us for giving him access to his own home." The room went dead quiet. Karen's smile faltered for the first time. "Sir," she stammered, "this isn't about discrimination. This is about maintaining the integrity of the community." That's when Marlene piped up from the back. "Integrity? Since when does integrity mean bullying a kid in a wheelchair?" The crowd stirred, heads nodded, a few whispered. Karen slammed the gavel again. "Order! Order!" But it was too late. The room wasn't on her side anymore. After the meeting, two neighbors, Sam, a quiet guy who worked construction, and his wife Jolene, pulled me aside. "Listen," Sam said, lowering his voice. "I don't usually get involved in HOA drama, but what they're doing, it ain't right. If you need someone to back you up, we're here." I can't tell you how much that meant, because when you're fighting an HOA, it feels like David versus Goliath. And let me tell you, Goliath has lawyers, but now I wasn't standing alone. The next week, the fines doubled. Karen even sent a warning that further non-compliance could result in legal action. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of notices, I finally looked at Daniel. "Son," I said softly, "how would you feel if Dad fought this in court?" He blinked, surprised. "Court? For a ramp? Not just the ramp." I said, "For your right to live here, for our right to not be treated like outcasts." Daniel nodded slowly. I think you should, Dad. That was all the permission I needed. What do you think? Was I right to take this to court? Or should I have tried to settle quietly? I had no idea the storm that was about to hit. Because Karen wasn't just stubborn, she was ruthless, and her next move would make the entire neighborhood choose sides. You ever notice how some people, when they feel their power slipping, double down instead of backing off? That's exactly what Karen did. After that HOA meeting where Marlene called her out and the room started to murmur against her, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd soften. I was wrong, dead wrong. Because 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of hammering. I rushed outside, and there were two men in orange vests standing in front of my wheelchair ramp. One of them had a crowbar in his hand. "Hey!" I barked, storming down the steps. "What do you think you're doing?" The taller one shrugged. "We were told to remove this non-compliant structure. Orders from the HOA board president." I froze. For a moment I couldn't even breathe. They were about to rip out the ramp, the one thing that gave my son his independence. "You touch that ramp," I growled, "and I swear I'll have the police here in 5 minutes." The men exchanged glances. They clearly didn't want trouble. One of them muttered, "Sir, we're just contractors. We do what we're told." "Well," I snapped, pulling out my phone, "now you're being told to leave my property immediately." They backed off, mumbling, and drove away. But the damage wasn't just the attempt. It was the message. Karen wasn't playing games. She was trying to intimidate me into compliance. That night, I sat at the dining table with Daniel. He was quiet, sketching as always, but his hands were shaking. "Dad," he asked softly, "why do they hate us so much?" My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him they didn't hate him, that it wasn't personal, but it was. "They don't hate you," I said finally. "They're just scared of change, scared of anything that doesn't fit their little boxes." Daniel's eyes welled up, but he nodded and went back to drawing. I couldn't let him see me break, not yet. The next morning I called the county office. I asked them straight up, "Can an HOA legally remove a disability ramp?" The woman on the other end practically laughed. "Sir, absolutely not. That's a violation of the Fair Housing Act. They could be in serious legal trouble for even attempting it." Her words steadied me. It wasn't just me thinking this was wrong. It was wrong, legally, morally, every which way you cut it. That's when I decided I needed a lawyer. Now I don't have piles of cash lying around. I'm a retired teacher after all. But Marlene gave me the number of a legal aid group that specialized in housing discrimination cases. A week later, I sat in a modest office with peeling wallpaper, explaining everything to a lawyer named Anthony Vega. He was young, probably younger than some of the students I'd taught back in the day, but sharp. The kind of guy who listened with full attention, pen flying across his notepad. When I told him about the fines, the meeting, and the contractors, with crowbars his jaw clenched. "Mr. Collins," he said firmly, "this is textbook discrimination. They're not just breaking HOA guidelines, they're breaking federal law. If you're willing, we can file a formal complaint and pursue damages." I leaned back, exhaling. "I'm willing," Anthony smiled. "Good, because I think we have a strong case." The word got around fast. By the next HOA meeting, half the neighborhood knew I had a lawyer involved. And suddenly, people who'd been silent before started to whisper support. Sam, the construction worker, came up to me and said, "Heard you're taking 'em on. Good. Somebody's got to put a stop to Karen." Even Jolene, who usually avoided confrontation, told me, "Don't let her scare you, we're behind you." But of course, not everyone was on my side. As I walked into the community center, I heard one homeowner mutter, "Great. Now property values are gonna tank because of a lawsuit." Another chimed in, "He should have just followed the rules like the rest of us." That's the thing about HOA drama. It divides people. Some see injustice and rally. Others just worry about their grass height and resale value. When the meeting began, Karen looked more smug than ever. She must have thought her intimidation tactics had worked. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to remind everyone that our community thrives when we respect the standards that keep our neighborhood beautiful and valuable." I stood. "Standards don't trump civil rights. My son has the right to live here without being harassed." Karen's eyes flashed. "Mr. Collins, this isn't harassment, it's enforcement." "No," I shot back, my voice echoing through the room. "It's discrimination, and I've filed a complaint with legal aid. You'll be hearing from my attorney." Gasps rippled across the crowd. A few clapped, a few groaned, But the best part, Karen's face. For the first time, her mask cracked, her lips tightened, her cheeks flushed. That was the moment she realized I wasn't backing down. After the meeting, I walked home with Daniel beside me. He was quiet, wheels humming softly against the pavement. Finally, he said, "Dad, I'm proud of you." Those 4 little words hit me harder than anything Karen could throw at us. Because in that moment, I knew this fight wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about fines or ramps. It was about showing my son that no one, not even an HOA board president, had the right to make him feel less than. If someone tried to tear down your disabled child's ramp, how would you react? Would you fight back or try to keep the peace? Karen wasn't finished. If anything, my lawsuit only pushed her to get nastier, and her next move, it nearly turned the entire neighborhood against us. Don't miss what happened next. Hit that like button if you're rooting for us, and subscribe so you see the fight all the way through. The thing about bullies, when they realize intimidation doesn't work, they don't stop, they get dirtier. I found that out the hard way. After I announced at the HOA meeting that I had a lawyer involved, Karen didn't back down. If anything, she doubled her efforts. And this time, she went for something far nastier than fines or notices. She went after my reputation. It started with whispers. I'd wave at neighbors walking their dogs, and instead of waving back, they'd cross the street. Marlene called me one morning and said, "Have you seen the Facebook page?" I hadn't. Honestly, I barely use social media. But when I pulled it up, there it was. A long post in the community group from none other than Karen herself. As HOA board president, I want to express how disheartened I am by one homeowner's refusal to comply with our community standards. While most of us work hard to maintain the beauty and safety of our neighborhood, some choose to make selfish decisions that harm us all. Non-compliant structures, eyesores, and disruptive behavior affect everyone's property values. We should stand together for fairness, not let one person drag us down. No names, but everybody knew who she meant. The comments poured in. Some people defended me. It's a wheelchair ramp, not an eyesore. Others, though, sided with Karen. Rules are rules. Why should he get special treatment? Next thing you know, people will be painting their houses neon green. It was like a knife to the gut. Not just because of what they said, but because it showed me how easily people can be swayed by half-truths. The next HOA letter was worse. It accused me of creating hostility in the community. It warned that legal action will be pursued, not just for non-compliance, but for damages to community harmony. Damages to harmony? I nearly laughed, but it wasn't funny, not when it came with threats of thousands of dollars in fines. Daniel found me sitting at the kitchen table, head in my hands. "Dad?" he asked, his voice small. "Are we going to lose the house?" I looked up at him, my boy, trying to be brave, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "No," I said firmly. "We're not losing anything. They can't take away what's ours, not when we've done nothing wrong." But deep down, I felt the weight. What if the court didn't side with us? What if neighbors turned completely against us? That night, Marlene came over with a casserole, her way of showing support. She sat down at my kitchen table and slammed her fist against it. "This is harassment, pure and simple. I've seen HOAs pull stunts before, but this is low." "Feels like she's winning," I admitted. Marlene leaned in, eyes sharp. "Not if you fight smart. Document everything. Every notice, every post, every dirty look. Write it down, take pictures, record calls if you have to. The more evidence, the stronger your case." I nodded. "That's what Anthony said too." "Good," she said. "And don't you forget, you've got more people on your side than you think." She was right. Over the next week, a few brave neighbors started to speak up. Sam came by with his toolbox. "Heard Karen's telling folks your ramp's unsafe. Mind if I take a look? I'll sign a statement. It's sturdy as hell." Jolene baked cookies for Daniel, leaving a little note. "We believe in you." Even Mr. Alvarez, who usually kept to himself, stopped me on the sidewalk. "I don't like drama," he said, "but I don't like bullies either. If you need me to testify, I will." Their support lit a fire in me. It reminded me of something I used to tell my students: bullies only win when good people stay silent. Well, I wasn't going to stay silent. The real turning point came when I caught Karen in a lie. One evening, I received an email from the HOA stating that multiple noise complaints had been filed against my property. Allegedly, Daniel was causing disturbances with loud outdoor activities. I stared at the email, stunned. Loud activities? Daniel? My son barely spoke above a whisper most days, so I asked Marlene to check. Her daughter, who still had access to the HOA board's Slack group, she used to volunteer for them, sent screenshots, and there it was. A message from Karen: "We need more leverage against Collins. If anyone hears even minor noise, log it as a complaint. We can build a stronger case that way." I sat back, reading the words over and over. It wasn't about rules. It never was. She was manufacturing complaints, lying to create a false record against us. That's when the teacher in me came roaring back. You know that moment when you've caught a student red-handed cheating, and you realize you've got them cornered? No excuses left? That's how I felt. I forwarded everything to Anthony. He replied almost instantly, "This is gold. Document it all. This will destroy her credibility in court." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Of course, hope doesn't erase fear. One evening, as I was locking up for the night, Daniel rolled up beside me. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" He hesitated, then asked, "Oh, what if we lose? What if she makes everyone hate us?" My chest tightened. I crouched down so we were eye level. "Son, listen to me. Winning isn't just about a court ruling. It's about standing up when you're pushed down. Even if we lose on paper, we'll know we didn't let them bully us into silence. That's a win no one can take away." He nodded slowly. His eyes were still uncertain, but I could see the spark of pride there too. "If your HOA president started a smear campaign against you online, how would you fight back? Speak up publicly, or stay quiet to avoid drama?" I had. Evidence now, real, undeniable proof that Karen was manufacturing complaints. But before I could use it, she pulled a move so outrageous it nearly broke my case before it even began. If this fight makes you as angry as it made me, smash that like button and share this story with anyone who's ever dealt with HOA drama. When I was a teacher, I used to tell my students, bullies rarely fight fair. They twist the rules. They find loopholes, and they always make you feel like you're the one in the wrong. Turns out, HOAs operate the exact same way, because just when I thought Karen's smear campaign had reached its peak, she pulled out her biggest weapon yet, an attorney. It started with a thick envelope delivered by certified mail. The outside said, "Law Offices of Pierce and Donovan, Attorneys at Law." I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope heavy in my hands. Daniel was across from me, sketching a dragon on his notepad. I didn't want him to see the tremor in my fingers as I opened it. Inside was a letter so loaded with legal jargon it made my head spin, words like injunctive relief and material breach of covenants. But the part that stuck out was this: failure to remove the non-compliant structure within 10 days may result in legal action, including foreclosure proceedings, as permitted under HOA bylaws. Foreclosure. They were threatening to take my house. Must have gone pale because Daniel looked up from his drawing. "Dad? What is it?" I forced a smile, folding the letter. "Just more HOA junk, buddy. Nothing we can't handle." But inside I was boiling, not just with anger, though there was plenty of that, but with fear. Losing our home. This wasn't just about a ramp anymore. This was about survival. I called Anthony right away. He listened calmly as I read the letter over the phone. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "Mr. Collins, don't panic. This is a scare tactic. They want you to fold. But here's the truth. They have no legal grounds to foreclose over a disability accommodation, not with the Fair Housing Act on your side. Then why send it, I asked. Because they're hoping you don't know your rights, he replied. They're hoping you'll give in before this goes to court. But guess what? They just made a critical mistake. What kind of mistake? By threatening foreclosure over a federally protected accommodation, they've crossed the line into retaliation. That strengthens your case. I let out a shaky laugh. So their big scary letter actually helps us? Exactly, Anthony said. Keep it. We'll use it in court. Still, the stress weighed heavy. Every time I looked at Daniel, I felt torn. Should I shield him from all this, or let him see the fight up close so he'd understand? One evening, he caught me staring at the pile of notices, fines, and letters. Dad, he said quietly, you always told me not to let bullies win. Isn't that what you're doing right now? His words hit me like a brick, out of the mouths of kids, huh? I nodded slowly. You're right, we're not letting them win, not this time. At the next HOA meeting, Karen strutted in with a tall, grey-haired man in a slick suit, clearly the board's attorney. The moment I saw him, I felt that old pit in my stomach, the one I used to get when the principal would walk into my classroom. During an observation, arms folded, ready to nitpick. Before we begin, Karen announced, her voice dripping with triumph, I'd like to introduce Mr. Donovan, who will be advising the board on ongoing legal matters. Donovan gave a polite nod, but his eyes landed on me, cool and sharp. Karen turned to the group. We are pursuing legal remedies against Mr. Collins for his refusal to comply with community standards. Gasps rippled through the room. Some neighbors looked at me with sympathy. Others shook their heads, buying into Karen's lies. I stood. My attorney has already filed a complaint for discrimination and retaliation. This so-called legal remedy will only make the board's situation worse. Karen smirked. We'll see about that. After the meeting, I noticed something strange. While Karen and Donovan basked in their little show of power, a few neighbors approached me quietly. Marlene, of course, was the first. Don't you let that shark scare you, honey. Remember, lawyers don't win cases, facts do. Sam added, you've got the facts, everyone knows it. Stand tall. Even Jolene squeezed my hand. Don't quit, we're rooting for you. Their whispers of support gave me strength. For the first time, I realized Karen had overplayed her hand. By bringing in the lawyer, she was trying to scare me, but she was also showing the neighborhood she was desperate. Over the next week, Anthony and I worked tirelessly. He had me gather every scrap of evidence, photos of the ramp, showing it was safe and sturdy, copies of every fine and notice, screenshots of Karen's Facebook smear post, the leaked message where she encouraged false noise complaints. And now, that foreclosure threat letter. This, Anthony said, stacking the papers neatly, isn't just a defense. This is an offense. We're not just going to fight their claims. We're going to prove they engaged in discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. And when we win, they'll be the ones paying damages. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we had the upper hand. One night, as Daniel and I sat on the porch, he asked me something that nearly broke my heart. Dad, he whispered, if they hate me so much, should we just move? I looked at him, my chest aching. Son, listen to me. We're not moving because of them. This is our home. We have as much right to be here as anyone else. You have as much right to roll down this sidewalk, draw that tree, and smile at the sunset as any neighbor out here. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than. He nodded, but his eyes were glassy. That night I stayed awake long after he went to bed. Staring at the ceiling, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about a ramp or a lawsuit anymore. This was about my son's dignity, his future, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from him. If your HOA threatened foreclosure over your disabled child's ramp, would you fight them in court or give in to avoid the stress? The legal battle was heating up, and I finally felt like we had momentum. But just when I thought I was ready for anything, Karen pulled a dirty trick that nearly shattered my faith in the whole neighborhood. Don't miss Chapter 6. Hit like if you'd fight back too, and subscribe so you see the justice unfold. If there's one thing I've learned from living under an HOA, it's that they thrive on fear. They count on people not wanting to rock the boat. Most neighbors just want to mow their lawns, wave politely, and avoid conflict. Karen knew that. And when her fines, smear campaign, and lawyer didn't scare me off, she reached for her dirtiest weapon yet, the neighbors themselves. It started with a knock at my door on a Saturday morning. I opened it to find Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman, who lived 2 houses down. She looked nervous, clutching a clipboard to her chest. "Mr. Collins," she said softly, I don't feel right about this, but I was told to ask." She handed me the clipboard. My stomach dropped when I saw the header: Petition for Removal of Non-Compliant Structure and Restoration of Community Standards. And below it, a list of signatures. Over a dozen of my neighbors had signed. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Mrs. Henderson, what is this?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Karen's been going door to door, saying your ramp is lowering property values. She says if we don't do something, the neighborhood will suffer." My hands trembled as I held the clipboard. Lowering property values? My son's ramp? Mrs. Henderson's eyes softened. "I didn't sign it. I told her it wasn't right. But others, well, they're scared of her." I swallowed hard and handed it back. "Thank you for telling me. Really." She patted my arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let her win." That night I sat on the porch with Daniel. He was unusually quiet, sketching but not really focusing. Finally he asked, "Dad, did I hear right? People are signing something against us." I sighed, not wanting to hide it anymore. "Yeah, son, some folks think the ramp is a problem." His lip quivered. Do they not want me here?" My chest ached like someone was twisting a knife in it. "Listen to me, Daniel. Some people are just too worried about their lawns and home prices to see what really matters. But you matter more than all the property values in Texas combined." He nodded, but I could see how deeply it cut him. And in that moment, I knew Karen had done something far worse than target me. She had planted doubt in my son's heart. That I couldn't forgive. The next HOA meeting was packed. You could feel the tension the moment you walked in. Neighbors, whispering, papers shuffling, eyes darting. Karen stood at the front like a queen about to address her court. The petition was on the table beside her binder. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice smug, "many of you have expressed concern over non-compliance in our community. I'm proud to say over 20 homeowners have signed a petition demanding enforcement. This shows unity, strength, integrity." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. My stomach turned. I stood. "You mean you went door to door spreading lies to scare people into signing?" Karen's smile never wavered. "Mr. Collins, the community has spoken." "No," I shot back, "you've manipulated them. You've turned neighbors against neighbors just to target a disabled child." Gasps echoed. Some folks shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. Karen raised her chin. "This isn't about disability. This is about fairness. Everyone follows the same rules." Marlene leapt to her feet in the back. "Don't you dare twist this. That ramp is legal. That boy has every right to it. And anyone who signed that petition ought to be ashamed." The room erupted, voices shouting back and forth, some defending me, others parroting Karen's "rules are rules" nonsense. Through it all, Karen banged her gavel, shouting, "Order! Order!" Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, with Anthony on speakerphone. I told him about the petition. He chuckled dryly. "Mr. Collins, don't worry. A petition has no legal standing against the Fair Housing Act, but as evidence, this could actually help us." "How?" I asked. "Because it shows a pattern. Not just the board, but the community, under Karen's influence, engaging in discriminatory behavior. That strengthens your case, especially with federal housing investigators. I leaned back, exhaling. So what she meant for harm can be turned into justice, Anthony finished. But the real surprise came the next day. I was walking Daniel down the sidewalk when a car pulled up. It was Mr. Alvarez, the quiet neighbor who rarely said more than a few words. He rolled down his window. "Mr. Collins, I want you to know Karen came to my door with that petition. She said if I didn't sign, I'd regret it, that she'd make things hard for me." I froze. "She threatened you?" He nodded. "I didn't sign. But if you need me to testify, I'll tell the truth." In that moment, I realized something powerful. Karen's intimidation wasn't just aimed at me, it was aimed at anyone who dared to resist her. And that made her pattern of behavior even clearer. That evening, I told Daniel. His eyes widened. "So she's bullying everyone?" "Exactly," I said. "But you know what that means? It means she's scared. She knows we're winning." For the first time in weeks, Daniel grinned, just a small smile, but real. "Then let's beat her," I smiled back, ruffling his hair. "That's the plan. If your neighbors signed a petition against your disabled child's ramp, would you forgive them for giving in to HOA pressure or cut ties completely?" Karen thought the petition would break me. Instead, it gave me more ammunition than ever. But before I could use it, she pulled her nastiest trick yet, trying to dig into my past to discredit me. Don't miss Chapter 7. If you've ever faced HOA discrimination, hit like and drop "Fight Back" in the comments to show support. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, Karen's petition had fizzled. People were beginning to realize they'd been manipulated, and a few even apologized to me privately. But Karen, she wasn't one to admit defeat. No, she doubled down, and this time she came after me personally. It began with an email. I was sipping coffee, trying to enjoy a quiet morning before work, when the notification dinged. The subject line read, "Community Integrity Concerns." I clicked it open, and my stomach dropped. Attached was a copy of an old article from a small-town newspaper, nearly 20 years old. It was about me. Back when I was a new teacher, a misunderstanding with a parent had spiraled into gossip. I'd been falsely accused of favoritism, but the case was cleared and my record spotless. Still, it was the kind of messy half-truth. Story that could look bad without context. Karen had dug it up, and now she was circulating it to the board. The message below was short, but venomous. Is this really the type of person we want representing our community? If he hides things like this, what else is he hiding? I felt heat rush to my face. My hands shook as I gripped the mug. This wasn't about the ramp anymore. This was character assassination. That evening I sat Daniel down. I hated telling him, but I knew he'd hear whispers eventually. "Son," I began slowly, "Karen's trying to bring up something from my past. Something that makes me look bad." Daniel looked confused. "But you didn't do anything wrong." "I know," I said softly. "But sometimes people use half-truths to twist things. She thinks if she ruins my name, I won't have the strength to keep fighting." His jaw clenched, and I saw a fierceness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Then we don't stop, ever." I pulled him close. "That's my boy." The HOA meeting that week was like walking into a courtroom. Karen stood proudly at the front, holding up the newspaper clipping as though it were a smoking gun. "Fellow board members, neighbors," she began with mock sorrow, "we all strive for a community built on honesty and integrity. But how can we trust someone with a history of questionable behavior?" Gasps echoed across the room as she waved the article. I stood slowly. "That's 20 years old. I was investigated and cleared. My record is spotless. My teaching career is unblemished. This is nothing more than character assassination." Karen smirked. "Or maybe it's a pattern. You bend rules in your classroom, and now you bend rules in this community." The crowd murmured. Some skeptical, some sympathetic. Then to my surprise, Marlene stood, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Karen, enough! I've lived next to Mr. Collins for years. He's a good father, a good man, and he's raising a son with more courage than you'll ever know. Digging up dirt from decades ago just proves you've run out of arguments." Applause erupted. Not from everyone, but enough to rattle Karen. Her smile faltered. That night I called Anthony, my attorney. I forwarded him the email with Karen's smear campaign. He whistled. "She really doesn't know when to quit. This is gold for us, Mr. Collins." "Gold?" I asked bitterly. "She's dragging my name through the mud." "Yes, but think about it. She's showing retaliation. You're exercising your rights under the Fair Housing Act. And instead of addressing the issue, she's trying to intimidate you with irrelevant personal attacks. That's textbook harassment. Judges hate this kind of thing." For the first time that day, I smiled. Maybe Karen thought she'd found my weak spot, but instead, she handed me a weapon. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I was walking out to check the mail when a neighbor I barely knew, Mr. Patel, approached. He was a quiet man, an engineer who kept mostly to himself. "Mr. Collins," he said, adjusting his glasses nervously. "I saw that email Karen sent. I want you to know I used to be on a housing board myself. What she's doing, it's illegal. I've saved the email, and if you need a witness, I'll testify." I blinked. "You'd do that?" He nodded firmly. "Yes, my wife and I talked it over. We don't want to live in a neighborhood where people are bullied into silence." It hit me then. Karen wasn't just losing control of the narrative. She was losing the neighborhood. But Karen wasn't done. At the next board meeting, she tried one last trick. "Given these revelations," she said, still clutching the article like it was scripture, "I propose a motion. Mr. Collins should be barred from speaking at HOA meetings until his character is fully reviewed." A stunned silence filled the room. She was trying to silence me entirely. I rose slowly, looking around at my neighbors. "You all know me. You've seen me coach my son in the driveway. You've seen me mow my lawn, wave hello, pick up trash. Along the sidewalk. I'm not perfect, but I'm honest. And what Karen is doing right now, this isn't about community standards. This is about power. She doesn't want fairness. She wants control." The room murmured again. A few heads nodded. Finally, the board voted. Karen's motion failed. 3-2. She slammed her binder shut, her face red with rage. That night, sitting with Daniel on the porch, I told him what happened. "So she tried to stop you from speaking?" he asked. "Yeah," I chuckled. "But it backfired." Daniel grinned. "Guess she forgot one thing." "What's that?" "You can't silence the truth." I hugged him tight, my heart swelling with pride. For the first time in months, I felt like we were truly turning the tide. If someone dug up old, painful memories from your past just to win a petty HOA fight, how would you respond? Ignore it, forgive them, or fight back harder? Karen thought she could bury me under old scandals, but the truth was stronger than her lies. And just when I thought the worst was behind us, she escalated to her boldest move yet, dragging me into a courtroom showdown. Don't miss Chapter 8. If you believe in standing up against HOA abuse, smash that like button and comment justice to keep this fight alive. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and floor polish, the kind of scent that carries weight, history, and judgment. I had never been inside one before, not as a defendant or plaintiff, but as I sat there beside my attorney, Anthony, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the walls closing in. Karen was across the room, perfectly polished, her hair pinned, back so tightly it looked like it hurt. She had a binder stacked with papers in front of her, her evidence. Every few seconds she flipped through it with a smug little flick, like she already knew the outcome. But this wasn't her HOA kingdom. This was a courtroom. Here power games and gossip meant nothing. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, opened the proceedings. Case number 32845, Collins versus Ridgewood Homeowners Association. Hearing. My name echoed in that solemn space, sent a chill down my spine. My son, Daniel, was in the back row, sitting with Marlene and Mr. Patel. He waved at me quickly before folding his hands nervously. I gave him a small nod. Anthony leaned over. "Stay calm. Don't let Karen get in your head. She'll try." I nodded, though my palms were slick with sweat. Karen struck first. "Your Honor," she began in her most self-righteous tone, "this entire lawsuit is a waste of the court's time. Mr. Collins is simply upset because our community enforces its standards equally. He was asked to remove a structure, an unsightly ramp, without proper approval. Instead of following rules, he wants special treatment." I bit my tongue. Unsightly. That ramp was my son's lifeline. Anthony stood smoothly. "Your Honor, what the defendant calls unsightly is, in fact, a federally protected accommodation under the Fair Housing Act. Mr. Collins' son is disabled. The HOA's refusal to allow a wheelchair ramp is not only discriminatory, it's illegal." The judge raised an eyebrow and scribbled notes. Karen shifted in her chair, lips tight. Then came her so-called evidence. Karen dramatically slid the 20-year-old newspaper article onto the judge's bench. "This speaks to Mr. Collins's character. He has a history of questionable behavior." Anthony barely hid his grin. "Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant, prejudicial, and completely unrelated to the matter at hand." The judge peered at the yellowed paper, then fixed Karen with a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Ms. Hayes, unless you can prove how this decades-old article about unrelated allegations has anything to do with a wheelchair ramp, I suggest we move on." Karen stammered. "Well, it shows a pattern." "No," the judge snapped. "It shows desperation." The gallery, our neighbors, murmured. A few even chuckled. Karen flushed crimson. Next, Anthony called witnesses. Marlene testified first, her voice steady and resolute. "I've lived across from Mr. Collins for years. He's never been a problem. The only problem has been the HOA's bullying." Then Mr. Patel took the stand. He explained the email Karen had sent around, trying to tarnish my reputation. He showed his copy. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "as someone who used to serve on a housing board, I can tell you this is targeted harassment. It has nothing to do with community standards. It's personal." Karen's face twisted in frustration. Finally, Anthony called me. I rose slowly, my legs trembling, and swore in. "Mr. Collins," Anthony began gently, "can you tell the court why you built the ramp?" I swallowed. My voice cracked at first, but then steadied. "Because my son, Daniel, has spina bifida. He can't walk without his wheelchair. The ramp isn't a luxury, it's his independence. Without it, he can't leave the house on his own." The judge nodded. "And what happened when you asked the HOA for approval?" Anthony pressed. "They denied me," I said. "They said it didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic, that I should consider alternative options. But there are no alternatives to accessibility. Either my son can get in and out of our home or he can't. It's that simple." The courtroom fell silent. For the first time, Karen avoided my eyes. Anthony let the silence linger before adding, "Do you feel you've been retaliated against for pursuing this lawsuit?" I took a deep breath. Yes. Karen dug into my past. She spread rumors. She tried to silence me at HOA meetings. She wasn't protecting the community. She was protecting her power. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to Karen. "Ms. Hayes, do you have a response?" Karen straightened, her voice sharp. "This man is twisting the story. If we allow him to bend rules, the whole neighborhood falls apart. Rules exist for a reason." The judge leaned back, unimpressed. "Rules do not supersede federal law. The Fair Housing Act is clear. Reasonable accommodations must be made for those with disabilities." Denying that ramp was unlawful. Karen's jaw dropped. The gavel struck. I'm issuing an injunction in favor of Mr. Collins. The HOA will not only allow the ramp, but will also cover court costs. Furthermore, this court will review whether punitive damages are warranted due to the retaliatory actions taken against Mr. Collins. Cheers erupted from the gallery. Daniel leapt to his feet, clapping, tears in his eyes. I felt my own eyes sting as Anthony squeezed my shoulder. "We won," he whispered. But even as relief washed over me, I caught Karen's expression. Her smile was gone, but her eyes, they burned with something darker. This wasn't over. That evening back home, Daniel rolled out onto the porch with me. The sunset bathed the neighborhood in orange and gold. For once, I felt peace. "We did it, Dad," he said, beaming. "We did," I replied, pulling him close. "But remember, justice is never easy. You have to fight for it." He nodded, serious for his age. "Then we'll keep fighting, together." I smiled. That was all I ever wanted him to learn, that no matter how cruel the world could be, standing tall mattered more than anything. Still, deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. The court had ruled, but people like her didn't go quietly. And sure enough, within days, I'd learned just how far she was willing to go to keep control. If you were in my shoes, facing someone who dragged you through court, tried to ruin your reputation and lost, would you forgive them and move on, or keep fighting until every last bit of power was stripped away? The courtroom victory should have been the end, but for Karen, it was only the beginning of her downfall. In Chapter 9, her desperation takes a shocking turn that even I couldn't have predicted. Don't miss it. Smash that like button if you believe justice always wins, and drop a victory in the comments to show you're with us. For a brief moment, I thought the courtroom victory was the end of it. The ramp was secured, the judge had ruled, and for the first time in years, I felt like my family could breathe freely. Daniel rolled out onto the porch every morning with a smile, and our neighbors stopped crossing the street to avoid us. Some even congratulated us, tentatively, nervously, as though siding with us might still invite trouble. But Karen Hayes was not the type to accept defeat. The night after the judgment, I spotted her car parked in front of the HOA clubhouse, lights on past midnight. Papers clutched to her chest, pacing like a caged animal. From my living room window, I watched her silhouette move back and forth, her gestures sharp, frantic. I knew that look. She wasn't done. At the next HOA meeting, our first since the trial, Karen arrived late, carrying herself with forced poise. She smiled tightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Let's begin," she said briskly, shuffling her notes. But things had changed. The room wasn't hers anymore. The board members, people who once nodded along to her every decree, sat stiff, avoiding her gaze. A few neighbors who had once whispered behind my back now stared openly at Karen, arms crossed. Marlene was the first to speak. "Before we go over landscaping budgets, I'd like to address something important. The HOA lost a lawsuit. We owe court costs. That means our dues are being mismanaged," the room murmured. Karen's jaw clenched. "That was not mismanagement," she snapped. "It was an unfortunate expense caused by one resident's refusal to follow protocol." My hand shot up. "With all due respect, Karen, a federal judge ruled against you, not me. You don't get to spin this into my fault. The HOA acted illegally, and you led that charge." A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. After that meeting, whispers spread faster than wildfire. Neighbors who once ignored me now stopped by to talk. "I never agreed with her," one admitted quietly. "She strong-arms people, threatens fines if you disagree." Another confessed, "She told me if I didn't vote her way, she'd find violations on my property." Piece by piece, Karen's empire crumbled. What had once been a silent majority now felt emboldened. The lawsuit hadn't just won me a ramp, it had exposed Karen's methods, but Karen wasn't one to surrender quietly. Within weeks, a new wave of violation letters hit mailboxes. Lawn too long, fence paint too dull, Christmas lights left up too late. Dozens of neighbors, people who had never received so much as a warning, suddenly found themselves in violation. Daniel rolled into the kitchen one morning, holding one of the letters. His small hand shook as he passed it to me. "Dad, she's targeting everyone now, isn't she?" I unfolded it. Sure enough, grass exceeding community standards. Our lawn had been mowed 2 days ago. It was pristine. I clenched my fists. "Yeah, son, she's punishing anyone who stood against her." Enough was enough. A group of neighbors, Marlene, Mr. Patel, and even some who had once feared Karen, gathered in my living room one Friday night. "We need to remove her," Marlene said firmly. "She's abusing her power again." Mr. Patel, who knew HOA bylaws inside and out, tapped a document. "We can call a special election. We just need signatures from 20% of the community." "Will people sign?" I asked, skeptical. Marlene smiled grimly. "After that flood of violation letters, they'll line up." And they did. Within a week, petitions filled. Doors that had once closed at the sight of a clipboard now swung open eagerly. People were tired of living under fear. Karen tried to block the election, of course. She declared the petitions invalid and screamed about procedural flaws. But the bylaws were clear, and for once, the board didn't back her. The night of the election, the clubhouse overflowed. Neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder, some standing in doorways, others leaning in from windows. Karen sat at the head of the table, pale but defiant. "This is a circus," she spat. "You people have no idea how hard it is to keep this community together. Without me, everything falls apart." Marlene stood. "Without you, maybe we'll finally have peace." Applause erupted. The vote began. One by one, ballots dropped into the box. Karen glared at each person as if memorizing names for revenge. But when the count finished, the result was undeniable. Karen was removed. Her seat at the head of the table was empty before the applause even died down. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. In the days that followed, Ridgewood changed. The air felt lighter. Neighbors waved at each other again. The new board, led by Marlene, rolled. Back unnecessary fines, opened meetings to more discussion, and even launched a neighborhood barbecue. Daniel laughed more. He rolled down the ramp Karen had tried to erase and shouted, "I'm free!" His joy was contagious. For the first time in years, I didn't dread checking the mail. No more violation letters, no more threats. And yet, sometimes, at night, I thought about Karen, where she was, what she was planning. People like her didn't just disappear. One evening, Marlene stopped by. "You here?" she asked. "Karen put her house up for sale." I blinked. "Seriously?" "She can't show her face around here anymore, not after everything." I exhaled slowly. The storm was finally over. As I sat on the porch that night, Daniel beside me, I thought about the battle we had fought. It wasn't just about a ramp. It wasn't just about an HOA. It was about dignity, community, and standing up to power when it goes unchecked. I looked at my son. He leaned his head against my arm and whispered, "You didn't just fight for me, Dad. You fought for everyone." Tears stung my eyes. He was right, and in that moment I knew our neighborhood was free, not just because of me, but because people had finally come together. If you were in my shoes, after finally defeating someone who tried to crush you at every turn, would you feel satisfied with justice, or would you still carry bitterness for everything they put you through? Karen thought she ruled Ridgewood forever, but justice proved stronger. If you believe communities are stronger when people stand together, drop a "justice served" in the comments and hit that like button so more people see how HOA abuse can be defeated. Time has a way of softening the sharpest edges, though some scars remain forever. Months passed after Karen's removal. Ridgewood began to feel less like a prison and more like the community I once imagined when I bought our home. Neighbors started talking openly again. Front porches filled with laughter instead of tension. Children played in the cul-de-sac without fear that some violation notice would shut them down. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like Daniel could truly belong. The new HOA board, led by Marlene, surprised everyone. Instead of ruling with an iron fist, they opened the doors wide, literally. Meetings moved from the cold, fluorescent-lit clubhouse to neighbors' backyards and porches. Decisions weren't decrees anymore. They were conversations. Daniel attended one of those meetings with me, sitting proudly in his wheelchair at the center of the circle. He raised his hand shyly and said, "We should add a bench near the playground so kids who get tired, or people like me, can rest." The board voted unanimously. Approved. Watching him, my heart swelled. For so long, he had been the target of exclusion. Now, he was shaping the neighborhood with his voice. One morning, as Daniel wheeled down the ramp Karen had once tried to erase, he turned to me and grinned. "This isn't just wooden nails, Dad. This is freedom." He was right. That ramp had become more than an accessibility feature. It was a symbol of resistance, of victory, of dignity reclaimed. Neighbors often pointed to it as a reminder of why Karen had fallen. It wasn't just a ramp. It was proof that one person's cruelty could be overcome by persistence and community solidarity. But what of Karen Hayes? Word traveled quickly in Ridgewood. Her for sale sign went up quietly at first, tucked behind a hedge, but everyone saw it. Weeks later, a moving truck arrived. No neighbors came out to wave goodbye. No children left drawings on her doorstep. She left the same way she had ruled, alone, but life has a way of following you. Months later, Marlene showed me a local news article. Karen had moved to another neighborhood, tried to run for their HOA board, and was rejected outright. Her reputation preceded her. The once feared tyrant of Ridgewood was reduced to whispers and warnings. "Don't vote for her. You'll regret it." She became a ghost of her former self, a cautionary tale told in hushed voices at block parties. And honestly, I didn't feel joy in that, just pity. For me, healing took time. There were nights when I still expected a violation. Letter in the mailbox, still felt the anxiety of being targeted. But slowly, Ridgewood began to teach me to trust again. Mr. Patel dropped by with homemade curry. The Johnsons invited us to their family barbecue. Neighbors I'd once avoided now became friends. One evening, as Daniel wheeled through the neighborhood with a group of kids running beside him, I realized something profound. Karen had tried to isolate us. Instead, she had done the opposite. She had united the community against her. Looking back, I often ask myself, was it worth the sleepless nights, the stress, the years of fighting? Then I see Daniel laughing on the ramp. I see neighbors who once lived in fear now living freely. And I know the answer is yes. Standing up to Karen wasn't just about one family's right to build a ramp. It was about drawing a line in the sand and saying, "Enough." We didn't just win a battle. We changed the soul of Ridgewood. Years later, Ridgewood looks different. There's a bench near the playground because of Daniel. There are murals on fences that once would have been fined for non-standard aesthetics. There are solar lights lining the paths, built by volunteers, not dictated by some rulebook. The community thrives, not in spite of its scars, but because of them. And every time I sit on the porch with Daniel, I see the ramp and remember. Sometimes, the smallest acts of defiance, like building a ramp, can topple the biggest tyrants. If you were in my place, after years of harassment and finally defeating someone who tried to strip you of dignity, would you forgive and move on, or would you carry that bitterness forever? If this story reminded you that no one is above justice, no matter how powerful they think they are, comment HOA Justice below. Share this video with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to like and subscribe so more people see how communities can rise up together.